Hi and welcome back. This is the third part, finally, of my series where I go through in detail every single treatment, medication or intervention I've tried in 5 years of suffering with long COVID. I'm going to talk about the current theory, rationale or science for why each might be effective, and then discuss my experience with it before sharing what the anecdotal reports are from others who've tried it, and whether it's still a relevant part of the toolbox today. I'm going to chapter each of them, so if there's anything you're particularly interested in, you can of course skip straight there. If you're interested in a treatment or intervention that isn't on my list, then I can strongly recommend Turnto.ai if you want to learn some more about it, as it's bloody brilliant at doing all of this stuff, and I've used it extensively in the process of doing the research to put together this video. There's a free trial in the link in the description, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Back on the subject at hand. I do have to add a big disclaimer up front to say I am not a doctor, this is not medical advice, and I am explicitly not recommending anything that I talk about in this list. Please do talk to your doctor before trying anything I talk about here, or indeed anything else. So without further ado, let's dive in. Cryotherapy is where you expose the body to extremely low temperatures for a short period of time, around 2 to 3 minutes. A typical course of treatment might involve 1 or 2 sessions a day for a week. So what's the scientific rationale for its use? Well, studies have shown that whole body cryotherapy can improve inflammatory symptoms in conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia, with improvements in depression and anxiety syndromes, functional status and fatigue, including quality of sleep. It's also effective in increasing post-exercise and resting heart rate variability, or HRV, which of course, as we know, is an indicator of increased parasympathetic tone activation. We haven't had any published studies directly looking at cryotherapy for long COVID, but all of this together is pretty promising. There's also an argument that it could, inverted commas important here, shock and help to reset nervous system dysregulation. It's essentially a slightly more hardcore version of cold water immersion, which I'm going to address next. Links to all of the studies referenced here are in the description, by the way, if you want to read more. Now, as for my experience, I went out to Austria in the summer of 2023 and spent a week in the Alps having a lovely restorative time and also twice daily cryotherapy. I have to say I felt much better whilst I was out there. Fresher, more alert, more energy and less brain fog. The incredible environment, I'm sure, was a big part of this too. But, and this is a theme that unfortunately is so common with all this stuff I'm talking about, the benefits didn't last for that long by the time I was home. I know a handful of people personally who had similar experiences, felt much better whilst they were doing it, but unfortunately the benefits weren't sustained. For reference, here's Turnto's take on patient experiences from trawling the web, social media and various long COVID forums. I'll just bring these screens up quickly, so pause or screenshot them and read at your leisure if you're interested. I don't regret having tried the cryotherapy, and in fact I went back later that year for another week of treatment. I felt better again during it, but the same results once getting home. Fundamentally, I do think cryotherapy is good for you at some level, but perhaps not going to resolve the condition by itself. Unless, in your particular case, you've just got some slight nervous system dysregulation that needs knocking on the head. So, moving on to cold water immersion. This is rather more accessible for most of us, given that cold water is more plentiful than cryo chambers. What's the theory behind it? Well, the mechanism of exposing the body to cold water for a number of minutes on a repeat basis appears to involve enhancing dopamine and endorphin levels, parasympathetic nervous system activation, increasing blood flow, muscle recovery, improved sleep and exercise performance, whilst also reducing oxidative stress, inflammation and muscle tension. All sounds pretty good in the context of long COVID, doesn't it? So I tried cold water swimming for a period in 2022, daily trips to Hampstead Ponds in the autumn. I always felt invigorated afterwards, clearer of head, and with a short burst of energy. However, the spoon's cost of actually getting to the ponds and doing the swimming just about exceeded the benefits, and I struggled with PEM whilst I was attempting doing this period of cold water swimming. On subsequent trips abroad, I've taken every opportunity to go for cold swims, whether it's in unheated pools or alpine lakes. And when the energy cost of doing it isn't too great, I genuinely felt better afterwards. Again, like cryo, it's probably not going to cure you by itself, but can certainly form part of a combined approach to improve your symptoms if you have a relatively low energy cost way of doing it. The community is generally pretty positive about cold water swimming, immersion or plunges, so do look up Jackie Baxter's podcast talking about it, and here's what Turnto brought up from trawling all of the internet. The advantages over cryo are that it's generally pretty inexpensive and easier to continue on a longer basis depending on your personal levels of access. Again, do pause or screenshot these summaries and read at your leisure. Next up, red light therapy. This has had quite a lot of hype on social media, but what's the rationale? The therapy is said to work at the cellular level by enhancing mitochondrial ATP production, cell signaling, and growth factor synthesis, as well as countering oxidative stress. A 2021 study found that red light therapy significantly improved energy levels, cognitive function, and respiratory symptoms in long COVID sufferers. However, this was a relatively small study published in a small journal, and it ought to be said that the evidence base for both the physiological effect and long COVID treatment itself is still pretty light. This is actually one of the things I've tried where I can't speak with authority, as I've only tried it sporadically. I've never had my own personal red light setup, and I think it's the sort of thing you need to be doing regularly to actually assess properly. I generally did feel better after doing it, but I was often combining the red light therapy with other treatments too, so it's hard to be entirely objective. To some degree, you can probably discount then my personal experience, but I mention it anyway for completeness. How about others in the community though? Well, it seems a little mixed. Not so much in terms of negative experiences, but more around it being difficult to directly attribute improvement to the red light therapy. Here's Turnto's summary on it, which mirrors what I've picked up from the community too. It said that combining red light therapy with sauna and cold water plunges is particularly effective. If you have access to a sauna or a cold plunge, then it might be worth investing in a therapeutic red light, although they are quite expensive. It's one of those things that might contribute as part of a combination of related therapies. Next up, high-dose benfotiamine or vitamin B1. For reference, high dose is about 1,000 milligrams a day. Now, I was put onto this by a chap I met at a natural juice bar just by the beach in Larnaca, Cyprus. Yes, really. This chap said he'd been completely crushed with long COVID, which had been very similar to mine for 3 years, but upon starting to take high-dose benfotiamine and the associated cofactors, corresponded with his complete recovery over a period of 2 to 3 months. Now, that's just one random bloke, but what about the science? Well, perhaps surprisingly, it's shown remarkable benefits in CFS and fibromyalgia, with survey respondents reporting large benefits and many people with ME and CFS and long COVID finding significant improvements in fatigue and post-exertional malaise too. Benfotiamine has higher bioavailability and tissue penetration than thiamine, and some studies have shown its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potential in activated immune and glial cells. The mechanism involves thiamine's crucial role in the tricarboxylic acid cycle, where deficient functioning leads to significant depletion of naive B cells and a corresponding impact on immune response. So, my personal experience. I started taking 1,000 milligrams of benfotiamine in late 2023, along with the necessary cofactors, which include vitamin B2, potassium, and magnesium. I noticed an immediate surge in energy and a significant increase in spoons, meaning that my PEM limit went up quite a bit. I had a great week, but then the benefits tailed off, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I gradually ended up slipping back to baseline. I can only assume that I managed to plug a deficiency of some sort, but ultimately taking benfotiamine didn't change the game for me or my particular long COVID puzzle. I took high-dose B1 for about 4 months before gradually reducing it and ultimately removing it, whereupon I didn't notice its absence. As for the community, I don't personally know many other people who've tried it, certainly not over a long period. So I asked Turnto, who summed it up like this. Again, not a huge sample size of people trying it, so draw your own conclusions. In summary, it might be something to try if you've tried everything else. Of course, speak to your doctor first. Ozone therapy. This is where your blood is put through a machine and infused with medical-grade ozone before being returned to your body. Proponents of the therapy say that the mechanism of action is as follows. When introduced to the blood, ozone has been reported to activate the immune system by stimulating the release of growth factors and other mediators. It increases the oxygen-carrying capacity of red blood cells and reduces ischemia in vascular disease by increasing the red blood cells' pliability and flexibility. In long COVID, the idea is that the therapy has a powerful anti-inflammatory action, can counter some of that vascular dysfunction that characterizes the condition, and may also have a powerful antiviral effect. It has to be said, though, that the evidence base for its use is still evolving. And yes, that's an intentional euphemism. I had 5 sessions of 20 pass ozone in autumn 2023, along with a combination of other IV treatments. It was during a period where I was really trying to throw everything at the wall to see what might stick. Now, how did it make me feel? I was tired directly after the session, so it did feel like it was doing something, and there were a couple of days that week where I felt slightly better. But overall, in the medium and long term afterwards, I can't say I noticed any particular benefits. I know of only a handful of other long haulers personally who've tried it, and their experiences were largely similar. If we cast a wider net out, then there are stories of those who attribute dramatic improvement or recovery to it. But for me, this is probably one to put some way down the list of things to try, given the weak evidence base and not insignificant expense. Shortly after I had the ozone therapy, I had a number of sessions of Leech Therapy. This is where you put medical leeches on your body, let them guzzle your blood, and get to reap the benefits of their anticoagulatory enzymes. I saw it as a natural way of doing the triple anticoagulant therapy that's talked about so much for long COVID. But before you think it's completely mental to try medieval stuff like this, medical leeches are used by the NHS as they're brilliant for complex wound healing. Why? Well, the enzymes they pump into you have analgesic, anti-inflammatory, platelet inhibitory, anticoagulant, and thrombin regulatory functions. For a condition that's as vascular as long COVID, I felt the leeches were a decent punt that might make some kind of difference. Now, I'm not going to show any photos or videos because it is kind of gross, but I had about 6 rounds of leech therapy, working up from 1 to 3 leeches attached near my belly button. After a couple of these sessions, I actually felt genuinely great. I remember walking to the train station afterwards and having this feeling like I wanted to start running. Who needs to walk when you can just go so much faster? I'd not felt like that for years. But the feeling was short-lived, and ultimately in the medium and long term, I have to say I don't think my leech therapy really changed the baseline. Now, I don't know anyone else who's tried it, so I can't comment on the community reactions, and Turnto didn't manage to find any either. So it's just me, I'm afraid. My conclusion on leech therapy would be that it might be worth trying if you like the idea of trying some anticoagulant therapy, but don't want the pharmacological version and all of those associated risks. Leech therapy can be considered safe, you just have to get your head around it. Next up, IVs. And this is a tough one, and it's hard to sum them all up. Arguably, they need a video all to themselves, as the mechanisms for each IV you could potentially have are complex, and there are lots of patients and doctors that swear by them. These are the ones that I've tried. Now, if there's a demand for me to make a video about IVs, then I'll do it properly and perhaps interview a doctor who can talk about their take on them so I can address the subject properly. All I can really say is that none of the IVs I've had I really felt made any lasting difference. Glutathione out of these made me feel the best shortly afterwards, and alpha-lipoic acid made me feel awful. I noticed no specific difference from the others. Again, IVs might be a little like supplements generally. You might notice a dramatic improvement if you manage to plug a deficiency that you might not have known you've had, but overall, I kind of see IVs as an expensive short-term boost. Again, your mileage may vary. Comments below if you'd like a more detailed deep dive into this subject. And finally, at least for this video, the fun one, psilocybin. Now, there's increasing legitimate research on the use of hallucinogenic or psychedelic drugs in medicine, mostly focused in the treatment of trauma and depression. But the interesting part of this is that it's based around the drug's ability to rewire certain parts of the brain. Now, you may be familiar with the term neuroplasticity if you've spent any time around this long COVID space. However, that wasn't why I wanted specifically to try psilocybin. But before I go into that, let's dive into the science. Recent research has identified peripheral serotonin depletion as the most significant discriminator between long haulers and normal folk, and serotonin was found to be the most significantly depleted metabolite in both acute and post-acute stages of infection, which might suggest that serotonergic psychedelics like psilocybin could address this fundamental deficiency. We've also got a case report of a 41-year-old female with long COVID who, after treatment with MDMA and psilocybin, reported significant improvement across fatigue, depression, anxiety, joint pain, and headaches. She was able to return to work and her cognitive function improved, allowing her to resume her PhD studies. So there is some decent scientific rationale for trying it, but what drew me to psilocybin was more of a gut feel. I was very aware of how much emotional stuff I was still carrying, a lot of it being very old. And anything that would help me process some of that I felt would be extremely valuable. So I had a guided 3-hour psilocybin journey, and I have to say it was really quite intense. I spent most of it releasing huge amounts of grief, sadness, and loss, which obviously involved lots of snot. And tears, and you know how it goes. Afterwards, I felt like I'd been to a different planet and back. It really was an incredibly profound experience. For the rest of that day, I was completely wiped out, which I think is normal. But the next day, I felt so much lighter. I had so much less of that internal tension, stress, and kind of bubbling anxiety, if you like. And I really do think it did my nervous system an absolute power of good, and my mental health too, to be honest. The couple of other long haulers I know have tried it had similar positive experiences. Now, it's not something that's going to necessarily rid you of the condition, but I do believe psilocybin could help you in your journey through it. There's not a huge amount of people talking about it online, but this summary from Turnto is useful. In conclusion then, psilocybin is a somewhat left field choice, and it will either appeal to you or it won't. But if it does, you'd have my encouragement to consider trying it. So that's it for the moment. Coming up in part 4, we have this lot, and if you missed parts 1 and 2, I went through all of these. If you want to have a go on Turnto, which I strongly recommend, there's far more to it than I've shown in this vid. Then there's a link in the description which will take you to the same place as this QR code. There's a free trial to see if you get on with it, and if you do decide to subsequently sign up, then using this link, the QR code or the code JES10 will give you 10% off. It's normally $9 a month, so that's already less than half the price of a ChatGPT subscription. And of course, if you'd feel comfortable sharing your experiences with anything you've tried, whatever kind of interventional treatment it might be, please do add them in the comments. And I'll try and get part 4 of this series out a bit sooner than I got this one out. So as always, look after yourselves. Until next time.